All right. Anything works. That'd be,
Everyone sets
I trust you. Use whatever ringtone you want. All right. Is this good or is that good?
Can technically just set a timer for
Yes? No? We good? All right. So what we're looking at here are, for the first couple lessons, we're going to be looking at causes of the war. We're looking at economic development during the American Antebellum era. Antebellum era meaning the pre-Civil War era. That is a map of the Union states in light blue. The dark blue states, Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Missouri, those are all Union states. They are border states. A lot of those state governments were on the cusp of seceding with the Confederacy. They were slaveholding areas. Many of their soldiers and families are going to be divided, some fighting for the Union, some fighting for the Confederacy. And then everything in gray from Virginia down to Florida and on to Texas are your Confederate states. All the white territory, this is territory claimed through Louisiana Purchase, Mexican War, Mexican Cession, and the Oregon territory that was split between the United States and England. Much of that territory had not yet been settled by, well, it had been settled, but not enough settlers to apply for statehood, or there were political issues like the Mormons in Utah, Native American tribes in the Dakotas like the Sioux that still dominated those areas. All right, so the first industrial revolution, just as we talked about last year, that industrial revolution begins in England and it makes its way to the United States. This is in the new nation post-American Constitution era. If we look back to the division between Democratic Republican Party led by Jefferson and the Federalist Party led by Alexander Hamilton, there was a division over the country becoming an industrial power or the country becoming a agricultural, small business, and artisan-based society. Hamilton was in support of industry and a national bank. Jefferson was not. Much of the southern states become Democratic Republicans. Industry is slow to grow in southern states. We do see industrial cities like Birmingham, Alabama, Richmond, Virginia, Danville, Virginia, but most of those are related to commodities that are either agriculture or mineral commodities. Richmond grows thanks to iron, tobacco, slave trade. Danville grows due to tobacco and textiles, and Birmingham grows due to iron. Where we see this industrial boom occur is in the north. And we have a lot of different English business owners coming over to take advantage of the ports of Boston, the ports of New York. There was a merchant society that had been around since the colonial period. And what we're going to see is that despite the fact that most of the Federalists were in the north, those areas had the navigable rivers, the fast rivers to support a textile industry. This also has a lot to do with the fact that the South is dependent upon a new crop. Tobacco was a strong cash crop, but cotton, after the invention of the cotton gin, became the king cash crop of the Deep South. So we start to see a lot of annual growth in industry in the north, and this is despite the political division. Ultimately, there was too much money being made, And the North nor the South could deny the fact that they needed to get in on making that money. And we see annual growth from 1815 to 1860, economic growth 1.5% annually. And a lot of that has to do with the growth of cotton and the development of textile mills, but also the development of canals, the development of turnpikes and roads, and ultimately the development of the railroad system. All right. Do you guys remember the American system? It was proposed by Henry Clay and supported by Daniel Webster. Anybody remember it? Kind of, vaguely. Does anybody want to like throw it out there, what they think the American system was all about? Not feeling it? Anybody?
Not confident.
It's okay, just throw some out there. Nobody remembers. It's all good. All right.
Wasn't that about taxes or something?
You're on the right track. Yes, it is. The proposal was launched by Henry Clay with the support of James Monroe and Daniel Webster. And that proposition was raise tariffs, taxes on what? Imports, and use those tax dollars to build state-to-state roads. Why did this get shot down?
People don't like having to pay money.
Okay? People don't want to pay taxes, right? I think we can all get behind that. People don't like taxes. Are taxes a necessary evil, though? Yeah. I mean, we can say all we like, and taxation is socialism. It is, but in any democratic society, you have to have social services like roads and canals. The way that we look at federal taxes today, the founding fathers and these early leaders, because what we're kind of looking at here, like our founding fathers are starting to die off at this time. Jefferson and Adams are still alive, but Hamilton's dead, Washington's dead, the Federalist Party's near, it's like breathing its last breath. So what we're looking at is this second wave of politicians who are going to lead new party movements, but they're going to take a look at how to pay for important services. What this ultimately does is it further divides North and South, and Andrew hit the nail on the head. The whole way that the American system could be paid for was through tariffs and taxes. But people did not see this as a federal obligation. They saw that if you want a road in Virginia and you want a turnpike in Virginia, which Virginia had one of the oldest turnpikes, Virginia needs to pay for that. And if Pennsylvania wants a turnpike and they want to connect with Virginia, then they need to figure that out. Well, this creates a little bit of a constitutional issue. Going back to what Donovan said, we know that only the federal government can determine interstate trade. We learned about a Supreme Court case last year, and you're going to learn about it again this year in government, Gibbons v. Ogden, that upheld that constitutionality for the federal government to determine interstate trade. So this is a little bit of a debate that wages between North and South. How do we connect the roads? What ultimately happens is the states pretty much step up and start to build their own roads. And in fact, many roads were built with private money. Many canals were built with private money or state monies. And nearly all railroads were built with private money. Okay? So this is going to be important because everybody wants to cash in, but not everybody can agree on how they're going to cash in. And then there is one underlying factor here in this industrial era. Slaves are connected to this because the agricultural output in the South and those natural resources moving to the North are going to be done so through roads, canals, and cotton, tobacco, indigo, rice, corn, all of these crops, they are going to help the northern economies grow as well. So what I want to point out is that the industrial development of the north and the agricultural growth of the south are interwoven during this industrial revolution. Question?
Yes, okay, this is sort of, kind of going back to the beginning of this little speech, but if you built the road, how did you make money from pouring money into something? Like, were there tolls, were there just taxes, did you get a rebate from the federal government?
Did you guys hear that? You like hit on there were land grants by the state and the federal government, there were tolls and taxes along the way, and there were private investments that backed the production. A really great example of that would be one of the greatest engineering feats of this era, and that's the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal put New York on the map as a global trade center because it connected the Great Lakes to New York City, and all these new cities that were sleepy little towns like Buffalo and Rochester and Cleveland is another good example. Those cities started to hustle and bustle due to the Erie Canal. The price of goods dropped, but the production of goods increased. But yeah, if you were to go down the Pennsylvania Turnpike or the Virginia Turnpike or what is now Route 70, which was the old national highway, you would have paid tolls along the way just as you would today.
So you would have paid, instead of paying the tolls to like the government, you would have paid it to company X.
Yeah, or to the state.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's that idea of like pay as you go for improving upon the roads.
Okay.
Another thing that I wanted to point out was the McAdam Road. Is anybody got family from Pennsylvania? Yeah. So my wife's family, they always call asphalt McAdam, and the reason they call it that is because McAdam was the guy that developed what we consider sort of hard top roads. He was taking shale and rock, and it's not like asphalt as we know it. It's just it was harder roads. Why were roads so dangerous prior to this development?
They were uneven.
Okay.
It down.
Wildlife was a problem, actually. Wildlife's a problem, but also
You got pits in the road, you got curves in the road. It's
Yeah.
all.
the dirt, like the mud and dirt that it was very dangerous to try to travel 100 miles or less than 100 miles. There's also a thing called a corduroy road. Have you ever heard of that before? Yeah, it's like logs stacked along the way. So those were obviously dangerous, more so for what animal?
Horses.
Your horses. If your horse breaks their leg, you're in a rough shape, right? And I know I got some horse lovers in the room, so that's tough to even think about. Erie Canal. Has anybody ever been along the Erie Canal? You can still visit. You can still ride on the Erie Canal. We have little tourist type trips down the Erie Canal. Has anybody ridden down the James River Canal? Yeah? Cool. So this is something that's important to bring up as well. The northern canal systems grew after the Erie Canal was completed, but the southern canal systems did not grow. Any ideas why? Any ideas why the southern canal systems? How many people have been on the James River Canal? Hands up. If you were in my class, you saw the James River Canal. If you were in my class last year, you saw the James River Canal because we went right to it. And hopefully we're going to go down there. My goal is to go to the War Memorial, and we'll go walk around the canal this coming year. I don't know when it's going to be, but that's something we're going to try to do. So with that being said, why would Richmond be one of the only, literally the only southern canal system? Any ideas? Yeah.
We got a lot of water, and we can just sort of float things down with a boat, and you don't really have to make a canal.
Okay. The James River is going to move an important commodity, and that commodity is going to be iron. right? But it can also move agriculture and a number of other things. But all of these other, like in the deep south, even though they had really great rivers that connected to their cities, there was no reason to build a canal system along the Savannah River to connect to Savannah, okay? There was no reason to build a canal system along the Cooper-Ashley rivers into Charleston, because those rivers were able to, people were able to move up and down those rivers without problem. And what makes the James River a little bit more difficult geographically? Has anybody gone up and down the James in their life? Of course you have. You've lived on the James River. What have you noticed about the James River from, oh, say, the city to where we are right now? Exactly. You've got like massive falls in different locations. So what they're going to end up having to do is develop a lock system to move boats up and down. This was very costly in the American South. Okay? So you'll see more of these canal systems develop in the north, only one in the American South, one major canal system, and that's going to increase the northern industrial production. So here we have the Erie Canal showing, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, I didn't mention, and it connects to the Hudson River Valley. This supports what we were just discussing. These are all the canal systems developed, and I don't know if you've ever seen how the boats move on a canal. They're flat bottom boats. The canals are usually about 2 to 3 feet deep, not very deep. And they typically have lock systems. Lock system allows the boat to move up and down by filling water into a box or a lock, moving the boat up and down. What the James River Canal system was supposed to do was, have you ever noticed downtown it says Kanawha Canal? The James River Kanawha Canal was supposed to connect the James to the Kanawha River. All right? What stopped that process were a couple of things. Number one, the railroad. Number two, the Civil War. It's also, that's some serious terrain to try to weave yourself through. And this the Eastern Continental Divide, to try to connect the James to the Kanawha, it just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And if you've ever been out, this is actually where I grew up. I grew up at the headwaters of the James. Okay? If you've ever driven Interstate 64 into West Virginia, basically what you're talking about is trying to connect a canal system from my hometown, Clifton Forge, Virginia, all the way to Charleston, West Virginia. That is a trek. By interstate, that's 3.5 hours. So to try to get through those mountain passes was going to be very difficult. Hey, how are you? You doing all right? Okay, any questions about these canals? All right. So again, state governments typically pay for these, some private investments. There were some federal monies, but as Michelle brought up, most of the federal dollars are going to be provided through land grants. Same thing's going to happen with railroads, but most of the railroads, do y'all remember Cornelius Vanderbilt last year? We talked about him. Cornelius Vanderbilt is going to make a fortune off of shipping in New York, and he's going to move a lot of that money into the railroad. All right, so we're good right there?
Yep.
All right, so just to wrap this up, 31,000 miles of track are going to grow in the north. A lot of private capital. We've talked in the past about the graft and loans from the government to develop these railroads. And I know a lot of you are thinking, well, yeah, that might have been the case for the Transcontinental Railroad. Well, how so in the east? There is a lot of rural land that people want developed in the east, and the way to do that is to lay down these tracks. And guys like Vanderbilt are going to take advantage of it and interconnect cities like New York and Chicago, and also smaller northern cities throughout. The South it's much more difficult. You've got a railroad that might go from Richmond to Petersburg, or a railroad that goes from, again, my hometown to Richmond to move iron. But they're not as interconnected as the northern railroads. There's another thing called gauge. Has anybody ever heard of a railroad gauge before? Okay, what is that?
How wide the rail for the tracks are.
Exactly. So this is an issue, right? The South, some states, counties, and localities are going to develop a railroad gauge and adopt a certain type of train, where others are going to use. The North is going to move quicker to develop a more universal gauge, and that's something that Lincoln's going to do as president. He is going to demand that there be a universal gauge during the Civil War, and basically the federal government takes over the railroad. So we'll get into that. I'm getting a little ahead of myself on that. So markets are going to connect east, west, north, south. I will leave you with this. The South is what we would consider stuck in a perpetual mercantile economy. What does that mean? What does it mean that the South is stuck in a mercantile economy? I know that you guys are like still getting back into the groove here, but you've heard this. Who's heard the term mercantilism before? Everybody. You've all heard it. Okay? So, how's the South, what is mercantilism? Yeah. This is the idea of this, guys, is that the South is stuck in a scenario where they have to depend on producing natural resources and trading those natural resources for finished products. All right? Whether it be lumber or cotton or tobacco or corn, and in connection to that, that's where we start to see more of not a need, but a want for slave labor. Slave labor was on the decline just after the Constitutional Convention, but it ramps up after the patent and, well, loose patent of the cotton gin, right? So the South's stuck. They've got to move these mercantile products to market, because if they don't, what's going to happen? They rot. They've got to move them. All right. So we'll continue this tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, Friday.